As is well known by now, ground combat will be a huge part of Odyssey. In particular, much of this combat is expected to take place in ground settlements. Here, players will be able to undertake missions, get involved in war zones, or simply attack the locations for the loot or for the sheer fun of it. Today, Frontier published a few new details about these ground settlements, so here we can take a look. The dev diaries have said in the past that attacking ground bases will have a variety of options, and that combat will be mixed and varied. But what does this mean? Frontier have mentioned a few examples now to clarify this. Bases, for example, may contain explosive equipment such as boxes with dangerous content. Shooting these may cause them to explode, thus offering some tactical opportunities. It will also be possible to disable and or take control of the base's automated defences, another tactical option. That said, the fact remains that players are very likely to invent their own tactics, such as dropping mines on a base from a height. Frontier assure us that this will be unlikely to happen due to the effectiveness of a base's defences. Personally though, I never underestimate players' initiative and creativity. I'm 100% certain that players will find an effective way to use ships at a distance against ground targets. So, as we've heard before, settlements will be populated by NPCs. The nature of these NPCs will be largely determined by the game's background simulation. At some point, players will likely have cause to infiltrate and attack such a settlement, but what happens when all the NPCs there are killed? Well, it turns out this won't actually be an easy task. Frontiers say the outposts will send for reinforcements and that these will become progressively tougher. However, the reinforcements are not endless and can eventually be exhausted. At this point, the outpost will be empty of NPCs. But that said, NPCs will eventually repopulate such bases. Now, Frontier state that the consequences for this will be severe, an extremely vague statement to say the least. Would the consequences for such an action be severe for the player, even if they are sent there on a mission by a dominating faction or even a superpower? Or would the consequences perhaps be severe for the NPC faction that were residing at that particular outpost? The statement actually introduces a lot of unanswered questions. One question we do have an answer to though is what type of states can ground settlements enter? Well, here's a list. Settlements can be active, abandoned, war, damaged, online, online damaged, offline, offline damaged, and conflict zones. Some of these are especially interesting, in particular the conflict zone state, which the dev diaries have hinted is an active location for combined arms conflict. That's troops, ground vehicles and ships all fighting in the same location. Now, with settlements having so many different states, not to mention being full of NPCs, you may be wondering if NPCs can appear in other locations. Well, it turns out that NPCs will not randomly spawn in areas around planets. However, it is possible that planets will encounter NPCs at certain areas of interest. And whilst we don't have a full list of areas of interest just yet, we do know from previous that areas of interest can include things such as shipwrecks. Returning to the subject of factions for just a moment, we know that bases and space stations, that is the current places and the new places that players will be able to visit for shopping and the like, are of course also places where players will be able to pick up missions. These missions will be offered by NPCs who are members of the dominating faction. But what about other factions that live in the same area? Well, it turns out that these guys will still be able to offer missions, but instead of doing so in person, they will be offered via mission kiosks that are located within these areas. Moving on to the engineers, as we know, Odyssey will come with a whole load of new ones. What's interesting here though is that all the engineers, including existing ones, will now have an NPC to represent them, so it'll be entirely possible to physically interact with them. So that's all the new information posted onto the forums by Frontier. There are a few additional details that I have here, which I'd like to share however. Frontier provided the following information to content creators in response to various questions we had, so let's go through these one by one. Firstly, clarification was sought on whether ships, SRVs and troops can interact with each other directly on combat or in combat on planets. Frontier have said that yes, this will definitely be possible. Now, in my comment sections and elsewhere on the internet, I've seen numerous comments asking if Frontier will be contacting third-party tool developers in regards to Odyssey. Frontier have said that yes, they will be reaching out to these parties in the near future. Meanwhile, we've seen some lovely footage of the new planetary tech. Frontier will be showcasing more of this soon, and they like the idea of doing side-by-side comparisons between current planets and the new versions of the same planets. That's not a confirmation that they will go ahead and actually do this, but it seems they are very open to the idea, so I'm looking forward to seeing if that actually happens. So that pretty much brings us to the end of this video. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.